Well, hey there and welcome back to Heimlich History. In this video, we're going to look at another one of your required Supreme Court cases for the AP government curriculum, namely Tinker v. Des Moines. So if you're ready to get them brain gals milked, let's get to it. And this is a really interesting case for high schoolers because it very much set the parameters for the freedom of speech that you have on school property. Okay, as always, let's begin with the facts of the case. In 1965, Senator Robert Kennedy called for a Christmas truce in the war in Vietnam. And an activist family called the Tinkers decided that they wanted to support this controversial measure in symbolic protest. To that end, 4 of their children and 1 of their friends made a plan to wear black armbands to school in support of the Christmas truce. Now, to put it mildly, the nation was a piping hot mess regarding the Vietnam War. There were protests and violence, and so this was very much not a neutral issue. So when the school administration heard about the Tinkers' plan, they went ahead and wrote a policy saying that any student wearing a protest armband to school would be asked to remove it or face suspension until they were willing to come back to school without it. And so the Tinker children decided to wear the armbands anyway, and they got suspended, upon which their parents filed suit. So what was the constitutional principle at stake? This was a case about the First Amendment's protection of free speech. Now, remember what I've been saying in all these videos on civil liberties. Our rights are not absolute. There are limits to them. And the question here is whether a student protest on school property, silent and symbolic as it was concerning a highly contentious issue, should be allowed. After all, school administrators do have the responsibility to create a good learning environment as free from conflict as possible. And so was this particular prohibition from the administration a reasonable infringement on the student's right to free speech? Well, to answer the question, let's see how the case was decided. In a 7-2 decision, the court ruled that this was a violation of the student's right to free speech, and while the court acknowledged that there were valid constitutional reasons for an administration to restrict the speech of students on some occasions, this case did not meet the criteria. In fact, the court created what's called the substantial disruption test as a decision-making criterion for how school administrators could constitutionally limit student speech. And basically, it just says that if a school administration is going to restrict student speech, they must be able to demonstrate that the speech in question would, quote, materially and substantially interfere with the requirements of appropriate discipline in the operation of the school. And since the wearing of these armbands caused no material or substantial disruption, it was deemed a violation of the student's First Amendment rights. And that's because, as Justice Abe Fortas stated in the majority opinion, it can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. Okay, now why does this case matter? It matters because it set the parameters for the question of free speech on school campuses and has been cited in many other similar cases to guide justices in their ruling. And before you decide to just go say anything you want at school thinking Tinker will protect you, I should mention that subsequent cases have refined the relationship between students' free speech and the school administration's responsibility to create a conflict-free learning environment. For example, in 1985, a case called Bethel School District v. Frazier took up the question about obscene and vulgar speech at school. In this case, a student gave a speech that was overflowing with sexual innuendos and was disciplined as a result. So in this case, the court decided that vulgar speech on a school campus was not the same as political speech like the students in the Tinker case had engaged in. And so they ruled in favor of the administration in that case and thus decided that there are legitimate restrictions on student speech. Okay, that's what you need to know about Tinker v. Des Moines. Click right here to grab a review packet if you need help getting an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May. And hey, if you want me to keep making these videos and express your right to symbolic speech by clicking that subscribe button, and I shall oblige. Heimler out.